All right, so what does Dean know that we showed his movie? How much does Dean know?
I have no idea.
I don't know anything.
Okay. Well, hi, Dean.
I know very
Clark.
little. Hey, Clark.
And we've got Russell, and then Randy is in Atlanta. Russell and I live together. We're in the same room. And then Randy is over there in Atlanta, Georgia, as he recently moved over there.
What up, Randy?
And we're in the Bay Area. We're in San Francisco.
He really doesn't say anything, huh?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
I mean, if you start talking about like Truffaut or any of some of that highbrow shit,
right.
he'll chirp in.
Okay, great.
That's his catnip. But Dean, so there's a lot of things to talk about. As Russell said, we're big fans, and we got a lot to cover here today, Dean. But I want to roll into the main thing. So we showed, was it 2 years ago now?
Yeah.
So we run a faux documentary and found footage film festival.
I know about this.
Yes, we showed Fraud a couple years ago at my behest. So this is our 5th year, and for 4 years up until we showed it.
At my behest? That's the only intro you're going to give it? This fool has gone on...
You interrupted me. I was giving my intro.
Okay. Well, no, just because you've gone on 3 separate podcasts, and his whole pitch was, I had to fight for Fraud to be shown because nobody else wanted to show it.
Look, I'm a storyteller. What do you want?
Yeah. I'm a liar.
Part of telling stories. Dean's a liar.
Oh, wow.
Fraud's full of lies. That's the show. That's the movie.
I prefer the word fraud, but yeah, okay.
There we go. So yeah, we showed Fraud, and but I was introduced to you, Dean, by what I'm going to call one of my favorite things on the planet, and that was Enjoy It with Brody Stevens.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I'd like to start there because that show, because Brody meant a lot to me, and that show meant a lot to me. Yeah. And I just how did you get involved with Brody and the show and Zach and everything?
Man, it was a while ago. I moved to LA because I kind of already wanted to move to LA, but because of that job. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll have a job there when I get there at least. And I knew I hadn't met Brody before, but I knew of him because I just ran in, had in comedy circles and had comedian friends. And obviously he was this like comedian's comedian, which I'm sure you're aware of, where like, everyone was just obsessed with what he was doing. And so I had gotten hired on it because I had done like some little videos that no one ever saw for Zach Galifianakis, and he had hired me. And and I think I was like waiting for my flight to leave to move to LA when some other comedian friends started texting me being like, hey, do you know Brody? Like his texts are kind of funky, right? His tweets are like really weird. And I was like, no, what are they talking about? And then someone was like, yeah, it seems like he's been tweeting every few minutes for 48 hours. And I was like, what? So Brody was going through his like mental episode right when I was like leaving for LA to supposedly work on that show. And then I was like, oh no, the star of the show is just like gone off the handle. He was, like telling, whatever, if you've seen the show, he sort of like had this manic episode.
Yep.
And then many months later, he had gotten better and was on medication, and he and the rest of the crew sort of wanted to like proceed with the show. And so we ended up doing it, and it really was, I don't know, I've never like talked about it. I feel like I might start getting emotional if we talk about it, but he was a great guy, and he was just like such a special talent. And ultimately, I mean, how much? I'm sorry to start it on a down note. It's one of my favorite things I've ever made, though, and I think that it went from being, oh, this is just going to be a slice of life show about a comedian to being, I think, like a really, at least we were trying to be thoughtful documentary about what it means to be somebody who's suddenly diagnosed with like what I would say is sort of like a pharmaceutically induced bipolar disorder.
Sure.
And then all the ripple effects that, having a manic episode on stage or while under the spotlight, like how to repair those relationships and get back on your feet. The thing that freaked me out, I think, the most was that when he was like having that manic episode for a minute, he had like everyone's ear in Hollywood, like more than he ever had in his life, and it was like, oh, this place is dangerous, I think.
Yeah, for sure. It was one of those things where, because it started with Comedy Central, and then because they billed it as like the first dramatic series from Comedy
Yeah.
Central, and I think that it lured in a bigger audience to see Brody coming in from that perspective. But me, being a comedy nerd, I was very familiar with Brody, and we actually tried to work with Brody up here, but Live Nation interfered with that.
Live Nation.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if you work with Live Nation, you can't work at any smaller clubs because of Punchline and Cobb's. So if you want to work Punchline or Cobb's, you can't work any of the smaller clubs.
So what were you going to work with them on?
We were going to do a show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is back when
we were talking with him. Yeah,
you were doing stand up at the time. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we were going to have him headline for a weekend, and but agents.
No, okay.
Sure.
Now I'm new to Brody, and how would that have played in the Bay Area? I feel like we're so
Would have been great.
I mean, he would have crushed, but I mean, like, I'm kind of new to the whole toil of comedy, and I think, Dean, you're a really interesting dude to have directed, because with documentary and comedy, the parallel here is truth, and it's kind of a different approach. Like, I come from like documentary background, so I know every choice you make in a documentary is essentially a manipulation.
You come from a documentary background?
Well, more so than a comedy one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know we were talking to Errol Morris.
I know.
Today.
I've taken a single documentary class, so it was great. It was very informative. But what I learned from that was, if you put a person in front of a green screen, that's a choice, and the audience sees it, and it changes their perception. If you put them in a lab coat and put them in front of a bookshelf, that also changes it. And with comedy is kind of like, you hang out with the person in a room. I'm speaking about stand-up, and it's all about kind of like disarming them, but also getting to a level like of a relationship where you can't do online, where you can have a real conversation and touch on real shit. And I've only just started getting into Brody, and I watched the first episode of the show, and I'm like, it's an interesting mashup seeing Dean, because it's kind of like exploring the truth, but through his, I don't know, is Brody guarded? He seems...
So a lot of what you just said is like really interesting. I hadn't thought about it before. The Brody is incredible for all his, like, when I first saw, I don't know, someone showed me a video of him or something, I was like, he was unrelatable to me, because I was just like, I don't know, he seemed like this big jock who was like super confident, and I was like, that's, I don't know, just not really my vibe. I don't think that's many people's like vibe.
Yeah.
And then he was incredible at disarming people who had that impression of him. I think maybe he knew, but like Zach Galifianakis gave the best summary of his like entire character and why he's relatable. It's like he's a jock doing performance art. And I would add a layer to that, which is doing performance art that like is so vulnerable, like putting himself in really vulnerable situations, and sort of like I don't know. In a way, he expressed both like a frailty and a toxic masculinity at the same time that made many. I mean, sure, he like probably bombed just as much as he killed, but he was really good at connecting with people on like a one-on-one level, even though he's like so intimidating looking and loud and can be angry.
Yeah.
It's really hard to explain how he does it or whatever. I would see shows where this is in the show too, where he would, and he also takes confrontational stances while also telling the audience, you can't be confrontational to me, like that's off limits here. So when he finds that an audience was like be crossing their arms, he would just go through the front row and point at people and go, arms crossed negative, legs crossed closed off, you're not looking at me, you like he'd be like, it was so funny. He would just would do it until people would like let down their defenses.
Yeah,
I think in terms of like the truth thing, he's I think it was certainly like me and my editors wanting, the reason it ended up being like quote unquote Comedy Central's like first drama was the kind of show that like a lot of the producers wanted to make was like straightforward comedy, basically like let's make sketch comedy that Brody was the center of, but let's just like do it really slapdash. And I don't know. My father's a psychiatrist. My mom's a social worker. I didn't really feel comfortable making like a comedy show with this guy who's just recovering from a manic episode that wasn't, in some ways trying to be therapeutic and tender with that process. So
Sure.
it sort of ended up being like a weird combo of the two. And I think that was what allowed Brody to feel comfortable exploring those things too. I mean, he had also just started doing therapy and stuff at the time, but I think he became like less guarded as he saw like, oh, I can talk about the real things that are behind some of this, and it can be treated sensitively, and I won't come off looking like, he has like he was a really old school guy. Like he had all those old school ideas of like men don't cry, and I think he felt like an outsider for most of his life because he was so sensitive.
Yeah. Was it difficult for him to, play within the constraints of the show, of what you were trying to make? Meaning, like, did he just want to do his, like, did you just let him go?
No,
Just
we
let
had
him
like a kind of a structured idea to like, okay, well, this scene needs to be this, or this scene needs to be this. A lot of the time, so yeah, we'd be like, let's just, probably the way that I've never done like reality TV, but I'm assuming it was sort of similar to that, where we would be like, we're going to film you going, to your sister's house to help with her like jewelry business, and then like kind of letting that just roll.
Yeah.
But it's a weird, now that I'm thinking back on that show, it is a weird combo where it's like some of the most outlandish cartoonish things were just real. Like his mom really is just like that to him, and is like just full of zingers. And then other things that are, more quote unquote true to his, or seem more true, or I would say are getting at some kind of honesty. Those are a little more scripted or a little more guided. And it's a weird line, because especially when you're dealing with comedians, you can make a documentary about a comedian and never access the person behind their stage persona, because they're doing an artificial performance, which they've like built up their entire life to protect them from, whatever their earlier trauma was.
Yeah. That's what I've been telling you for years.
Oh, I know. Hey, no, I've learned to become a lot more vulnerable, just from enjoying comedy in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And you really like, with stand-up, you can really tell who's vulnerable on stage. And even if they're not necessarily making you laugh, you still start to root for them. And I'll tell you, Brody, he was the type of comedian that scared the shit out of me. As a totally insecure dude, like I didn't want to go into a comedy club, and I used to tell this to Clark all the time. Like, my fear is that comedian looks me in the eye and sees I'm weak, and they just prey on me. And it's like, that was my nightmare. And I mean, I think the second time I ever went to stand up was to support you.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting behind a pole, like kind of being like, I'm out of sight. This guy knows me too. And then watching that first episode of Brody's show where he like, it's a part of like the crowd work. It's confrontational. But I feel like after the end of that, it would almost be like therapeutic just being in the room.
Yeah.
Like you'd want to hug him. And it never made sense to me, because every comedian I saw, they loved the dude. Where I think the only exposure I had was him opening up Chelsea Lately. And I was like, nope. I'm scared of that guy. I don't want to fuck with him. Like, how tall was Brody?
Brody's a big guy. He played baseball at Arizona State.
He's like a giant. I'm just like, I don't want that guy making fun of me, because normally, I mean, I'm large, mostly wide than tall, but like, if you got some like swarthy little bastard coming after you, could be like, bitch, get away from me. Like, I'll push you. You know what I mean? But when somebody's got a foot on you and they look like that, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, totally. And he's lifting kettlebells on stage.
Love kettlebells.
Man, I only briefly started episode 1 of that of your show, and man, I am so intrigued. Again, because I can't even tell what it is. It looks like a great platform for a comedian, but it also looks like it reminded me of Behind the Mat, the wrestling documentary. Where it's kind of like, well, because with pro wrestling, it's all kayfabe, and it's similar to stand-up where you build this persona. And then you get a documentary filmmaker who can actually get people being like vulnerable and honest. And it's a different world. And sometimes it's not one you want to look at. And it can be very ugly. And I don't know, man. I'm excited. I mean, I've only watched like half of episode 1, but I'm intrigued.
Brody's the closest to a professional wrestler you could get in stand-up comedy, I think. He's like, you really, when you say like kayfabe, I was like, oh yeah, there is so much. That was a lot of like the process was being like, I wish we'd stumbled across like using that term to direct him to be like, okay, now let's do one that's not kayfabe.
Would he have taken that direction?
I think so. He loves sports metaphors.
Oh yeah, that's a good end. Well, because now I watch a lot of Clark gives me shit. I mostly just watch Kill Tony. The craft of that show I really like, and I feel like I love amateur work too, which kind of feeds into like found footage film too. I love watching what non-professionals do.
Absolutely.
And the dialogue they have there on stage is always incredible. And the thing I think about Brody is the only video that pops up on my feed on YouTube now is him and Tony going at it. And him on Telescope having weird, and it's like
Periscope.
Yeah. And I'm like, is this the act? Is that like his bit? Or because it's like with found footage, it's like this isn't on stage. This is happening in a hallway at the Comedy Store. And he's streaming it live, but that fight with the other person is very real.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, a lot of the time you couldn't really tell where the line was with Brody and where it wasn't. I think I don't, I couldn't necessarily tell even when I was spending like all day, every day with him. He was, I mean, there's so much to unpack about this show. Thanks for allowing me to like revisit it. I also think that all those social media apps that allow you to just have a stage all the time makes it probably confusing for someone that maybe doesn't have rigid lines. But yeah, I would when Periscope was still around, I would like I'd check in on it, because at that point that was like way after the show, and so we didn't have that much contact. But I would like, just check in on Brody, and he's drumming on his steering wheel in a parking lot 2 a.m.
Well, social media blending things is interesting because I don't hear a lot of people talking about that, where people like lose, like I'm a big TikTok person, but now in real life I am. And whenever I think about that with comedy, I always think of you telling me that happened to Andrew Dice Clay, where you're like, it worked out for him that this character is just like, everybody loves it.
Yeah.
And then the real guy kind of just faded. Like, like he's
become Dice.
But is that something people celebrate or mourn?
Well, it's definitely a death of sorts, I would argue. Have you seen that when the Day to Laughter died album, or listened to it?
One of my favorite things.
It is a true.
It's wonderful.
Talk about a blurred line, man. It's an incredible document of something. I don't know. Is it celebrated? I mean, I bet it's probably celebrated by their like agents and touring reps, and mourned by those that were close to the old person who liked the old person.
Yeah, I don't. It's weird.
It's also it also ramps up, and I think it's impossible to avoid, especially when you're somebody like, I mean, I don't know Andrew Dice Clay, but like somebody who has like this really bombastic stage persona. Seeing fans, on the street and not being that person is like probably a constant disappointment and a constant reinforcement that you should just be the character all the time, because nobody wants to run into Andrew Dice Clay and meet Andrew
Silverstein.
yeah, exactly.
Now, okay, comedy and documentary and truth, right? They're like thrown in this blender.
It's the holy
right
trinity.
Here. Now, I'm curious. Now, fraud. Now we got to touch on fraud because we're all so smitten with it. And I looked up our programming from 2019. UF3, the Unnamed Footage Festival, our third one, out here in the Bay Area, pretty much ushered in the coronavirus. Yeah. And we actually lost a couple of guests that were supposed to be there in person.
It was 2 weeks before quarantine.
Yeah, COVID already took them. They were hanging out in China. No, they were, as a found footage filmmaker might be, a little paranoid. And they gave us a couple cryptic tests, and we're like, I might not make it.
Yeah.
And then sent a picture of them in a gas mask. And we're like, okay, what's going on here? That's not a joke. Anyway, we powered on. And on Sunday, we showed it. Now, I just want to give context of how important we think your film is. We put Fraud after Noroi, probably the most epic found footage movie ever made, that came out of Japan. Noroi the Curse. Do you know that film?
I don't think so.
It's it's mixed media. It's about a guy investigating a documentary subject that any documentarian that's followed has gone missing or died.
Oh yes,
So,
I know about this movie, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, in the found footage community, it's huge.
It's a 2 hour.
It's 2 hours, which
epic.
is a no for found footage normally.
Yeah.
So then we followed that up with Fraud, and after Fraud, we did They're Inside. Now the idea here was we start fun, and then we take everything we learned from Noroi, and we apply that to Fraud, which is really interesting because it's a lot of editing and storytelling. Right. And then I really wanted Fraud to be a platform for They're Inside, which was it's kind of like The Purge meets The Strangers. But the director, John Paul Pinelli, he knew that to make a real found footage film, the true master behind the story is the editor. So there are things in that movie that make no fucking sense for a Hollywood film to have. And they actually feel kind of pretentious, and like, if your eyes aren't rolling during that first watch, you don't understand like film. And he knew he was shooting himself in the foot doing it. And I thought if we understood Fraud, people would be a little bit more open. Yet what I've learned from films like Fraud is when you paint a picture that's a little bit skewed or blurred, and people really buy in hook, line, and sinker, the reaction is they get fucking mad. Has that been your reaction, and like the response with that film?
Oh, absolutely. Nobody likes to be tricked, it turns out. It was like totally. I mean, I was pretty surprised. I knew that we were going to have some like kind of I don't know, Q&As that would be a little like could get a little heated or something. I was expecting a little heat about it, but I did not expect that like people, when they've just spent an hour watching some characters that they think are real and they are furious at them, even when you tell them that's not the reality, they're still that fury doesn't just go away. It has to like burn off. And so I did not really expect that. I don't know if that's like the same experience you guys had, but it's certainly, especially older people in the crowd, I tend to notice like a generation gap, the doc purists who were like, this is not a documentary and you're morally bankrupt for doing this, basically. Those were usually older people, but not always. It was really interesting to see the reaction. I think anytime that it's sort of, it's to me, it feels like equivalent of like, I don't know, when your faculties fail you, I think it might be human nature to get into kind of a fight or flight mode.
Yeah. How antiquated is documentaries are truth?
Oh my God.
You're not really critically thinking at all about documentaries. And I mean, documentaries are great propaganda for the exact opposite reason.
Yes, and I think we forgot that, and I don't know why we would have forgotten that. So baked into the genesis of documentary as a genre, like Nanook of the North and Robert Flaherty's movies were like scripted, and everyone kind of knew that, and we were calling them documentaries. And I think at some point people forgot, and now still seem to assume that they have some like journalistic integrity, but they're not. They're just another genre, like any movie.
Exactly. Like I've been saying, Ken Burns is a scumbag. That's a toupee. Nobody's buying that.
No, I mean, so yeah, Fraud, after we watched it, we had some people who were angry, and they're like, why would you show this? And I'm like, why? Do you know what we do here? I'm like, we show the Blair Witch, and mostly the conversation we have is just about like, we've been talking about this for years now, and I really think people who enjoy found footage are people who aren't there for truth, and they're kind of like, I'm on board for whatever reality you're pitching me. Mm-hmm. I think we loved Fraud because the technique involved, the time spent, the storytelling chops you have to make some shit like that. And like, man, you're working within parameters of video that other people shot. It couldn't be easy. And it's astonishing. And then you get somebody come up to you and be like, that was fucking fake. It was a waste of time. And I'm like, what do you think The Wizard of Oz was? Right? I'm like, no, I'm like, Hollywood movies, they're not real.
Yeah.
So like, what the fuck are you looking for?
I think that, yeah, I think people, I know. I'm like, man, it would have been like when people would be like, I can understand. Well, sorry. I can understand like if someone thinks it's all written and scripted and we're just going, really hard into like, I don't know, whatever. I can understand I can understand being annoyed that that story took the form it did if you think it's written. Which whatever, but yeah, the people that people that are like it was fake, therefore it was a waste of time, and I'm upset. I don't really understand that criticism. I understand being like, I don't know. Yeah, they're interesting points. In terms of the editing and everything, like, yes, it's absolutely it all started for me from a place of I was an editor before I was a director, and I felt like, I was making my living editing stuff I didn't care about, occasionally like commercials or like for a while it was water birth tutorials. Like it's just crap. That was my first editing gig fresh out of college, was this like 2-hour long water birth tutorial. But so I was just like really, I was enamored of editing as an artistic medium, and then I went into the work world and like there's not that much opportunity to do creative things with editing, and I just was started thinking about like how can I use footage to make myself to amuse myself basically. And I would, for a while I was like planning to make this website called Look What I Did Instead, which is just footage from like the David Yurman collection commercial that I edited, but just like edited to create like a little horror film or whatever.
Please do.
and so that led into this idea of like I just was a fan of Gary's YouTube videos because I just felt like they were like pulsing with something weird underneath, and I knew I couldn't like ever get in touch with them. I probably wouldn't get any answers, and so I was just like, maybe I can just use this footage to tell the story, to just recontextualize all of this to answer those questions that I have for myself, or at least like propose an alternate reality with it. And so, yeah, I agree with you that like, I don't think editors get enough credit for being like truly the mastermind of not just found footage films, but a lot of movies, definitely documentaries.
No, for sure. And
yeah,
if you're going to look at a found footage tape and there's any editing at all, the editor is now the author of this movie. It doesn't matter if it's like a snuff film that, like, I mean, if we're going to go into like horror territory and it's like a lady was chopped up, but there's editing in there, it's like, well, the true deviant here is the guy that like touched it up. You know what I mean? Like he's the last hand here. And I think, with fraud, what makes it so eerie is just that the man behind the camera is shooting that video seemingly for nobody but himself. Like there's an audience interaction that happens when we watch a found footage film, and it's like, what are they trying to tell me? And in that, I think he was just incredibly honest. He was very attracted to his wife, and I don't know if he thought he was ever going to show anybody this stuff, even though he put it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And when you show an audience and he's zooming in on, mind you, his wife on the beach, her butt, the revulsion that goes through that crowd. And it's like, they have a couple of kids. They've, it's been consensual for a while.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
Well, it brings up so many interesting things. So, so he's okay. The real, so I didn't meet Gary or his family while we were making it. I spoke to him on the phone, I think twice the whole time. Because I wanted to avoid like knowing what the hell was going on with him or his family, or I just wanted to be able to create from a place of like total blank slate. But then when I met him and I started talking to him, I learned that the reason he made a YouTube channel was because Anche, his wife's family, still live in Berlin, and he wanted to give them like slice of life footage of what it was like living in America. Which means that the zooming, all the things that I was like, what is this guy doing? He does a ton of like zooming in on logos that just says like Dentine Ice. And then he'll say Dentine Ice. And I was like, what is this? Like, why? What is the context where this makes sense? So when he told me that, I was like, oh, got it. For a second, I was like, got it. That makes a lot of these things that feel sort of like vaguely predatory and like really like detail oriented. It makes them suddenly like, oh, it's educational for his in-laws. But then it makes zooming in on his wife's butt and lots of teenagers in bikinis make even less sense.
It also made sense because she was wearing a lot of Red Bull Formula One stuff, and at that time, Sebastian Vettel, who's a German driver,
All right, here we go.
was the
Yes. Wow,
four-time
dude.
champion.
Yes, that's what they're celebrating when there's a moment where they're jumping up and down that we made it look like they're jumping up and down, like giggling because they bought a bunch of new hats and stuff. They're
Yeah.
giggling because he won whatever that race was. I'm not sure.
The Formula One World Championship. Dave.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that
It's
thing.
very- it's
Sebastian
very-
Vettel. Okay.
Sebastian Vettel, one of the top drivers. Didn't work out with Ferrari, but it's okay.
So, man, that changes the whole context of that hotel.
Yeah.
Because yeah. I mean, God, what a great. So basically, you took those celebrations and their worshiping of brand, or you turned it into that because they were celebrating a fraud they had committed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, genius. So at what point, like, how did you find him?
I wish I could remember or had a good story about how I initially found him, but I found him so much earlier than I even began making the movie. Like, I think I just, subscribed to his YouTube channel like 3 years before I started, even had the idea to like make this something. And I think it was just back then the algorithms were not as good and as sophisticated. And I think it was just suggested for you, like, or something. I went down some weird hole and found these videos and I was like, what is this? Like, it stood out because everyone else on the internet is like trying to brand themselves or cultivate an image. And this was just like watching someone's life flash before their eyes. Sort of, I mean, some of the stuff is so neutral. Why would you record a package of Dentine Ice and say Dentine Ice? Why would you record certain? And then sometimes you'd be like, you'd see it'd be like 1 second of a cloud and then 1 second of his daughter being like, "Daddy, can I have the?" And then it cuts, and I'm like, if you're making a whole movie, you focus on the kids. You don't just like show the half of a sentence or whatever. And so I was just like so enamored. Also, the editing style, it's so like our editing in the film is mimicking his editing of the videos, the original videos. And that to me as an editor, I just was like really drawn by how fresh and like bonkers it seemed. Like I didn't know if it was like some genius or like outsider artist or just a dad, which is what it turned out to be, is a dad who has a camera that records when he holds down a button, but then stops when he lifts his finger off. So it's like that pacing was created by that. So I just like, he'd post every few months and I'd watch his new video or some of it and show my friends and be like, isn't this interesting and like weird? Like it's so frenetic and it feels so, it felt like mainlining somebody's like memories.
Wow.
Now, it felt like I was watching someone's life flash before their eyes just before they died. Or I'm dying, but I saw someone else's life by accident. That's what it felt like.
Now, everything that you used in the film, was all of that uploaded to YouTube, or did you have any sort of like B-roll stuff from him?
No, there's all his videos. We only got in touch with him to be like, hey, can we do this kind of weird art project with your footage where we make it seem like a different, story? And he was like, yeah, cool. And then we just downloaded everything from his YouTube. But the it wouldn't have been possible without other videos that were also on YouTube. So like his footage, for example, like we would, when we needed the house to burn down, we needed a shot of the house burning down, we would type into YouTube like my neighbor's house on fire and find that footage or whatever. So everything existed on the internet already, existed on YouTube or Dailymotion or one of those, but it wasn't all his footage. Like the shot of the car sinking in the lake is reversed footage of a towing company pulling a car out of a lake.
Love it.
Yeah, I love that stuff. Now, fraud, did you ever get shit for making money off of somebody else's like work? I don't know how to phrase that. Somebody else's YouTube channel?
I guess if I'd made money, that would have been appropriate criticism.
I was trying to frame that from like an audience because
yeah. Well, it's also, so this goes back to like the state of documentary right now. It's also interesting because there's this ongoing debate in the documentary world about whether you should pay subjects or whether they should be producers on a film about them, because it, like you're saying, it changes the performance they're doing of themselves to know that they are maybe getting paid for this, maybe they'd be inclined to make it more salacious. Maybe they'd be inclined not to tell you the whole truth. So Gary actually does have some percentage of the back end. Should we ever see that?
Yeah.
Should we ever become a profitable film? And I feel like I just think that we need more refined terms around documentary. I think like for a documentary, for a story, for a subject that is not, like has no motive to change their story, but their story is, the story of your documentary, and their access is essential to why people are seeing this movie. I think that they should get paid for that. Or they should be producers on the movie, or, benefit from its success. But a lot of people feel like that's like, that lessens the integrity of the film.
Well, I'll argue against you here. If now I imagine in my head that somebody would come up and be like, how can you profit off of, somebody else's video that they like put up on a free platform? And I do like doing a lot of people watching on YouTube too. So I watch a lot of weirdos who post a lot of stuff. And one of them, I'm sorry, I'll bring him up. Gothic King Cobra.
You get 2 minutes.
He was the subject of a documentary, and he spun out doing his own thing. His name's Josh Saunders. He's in Wyoming, and he has a ventriloquist dummy. He's a Gothic cowboy. He owns a shotgun. He's probably manic depressive. He drinks and passes out on stream, and he's got a he's got a good heart, but he is an antagonistic dick. And I used to watch him a lot. And the reason I bring him up is because there have to be 10 other people who have complete YouTube channels just re-editing his footage, and they're monetized. Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, nobody should be able to give you shit about that when this is kind of the new territory we're in. And at the end of the day, I think Cobra, he even realizes the more people making videos about me, they drive them to me.
Right.
So we're in a weird new time where
we are definitely in a weird new time.
I've heard what's his name? Andrew Bard, I think, a philosopher, who was talking about how money really isn't the driving currency anymore. It's time. It's eyeballs and attention. So if you have a bunch of satellite channels out there bringing attention to you, you're actually richer for it.
That's interesting. Is that yeah, that's interesting. The logic, though, could then be used to fuck with filmmakers or creators, because if a lone person is allowed to do that and monetize it, then I think YouTube would argue like, oh well, we can use what's his name, Gothic King Cobra, in our commercials, or we can exploit him, and not that they would want to. It sounds like, but I think, we can exploit that. But I kind of agree with you.
I think Andrew Bard, what he points to defend that is, how many times have you come across a commercial on Instagram or Facebook or any social media and clicked on it and bought it because of that commercial? And it's like, your answer might be never.
Yeah, and, it's really never.
This is big companies throwing money at you. Like, they're trading money for your time, and you're saying no. Like, you can't buy it. And that's why, TikTok is the #1 platform, even though I'm still confused as hell what they're watching.
I agree that attention is like, that's the new economy or something. I found myself recently like going to the dog park a lot. I mean, I do have a dog. I'm not a creeper.
Okay.
I found myself going to the dog park more and more, and I was like, why does this like space feel so much better? And it dawned on me that, like, especially living in LA as I do, it's the only place where I'm not being advertised to.
Oh.
It's the only place. And I almost only want to sit until yeah, exactly.
Let's get an Overlook banner on a bench or something. God, that is true.
It's wild to see the numbers now, like the way that Amazon or Netflix like flex now is by the accumulated hours that a show was watched. So they'll be like, Squid Game had 50 million hours this evening or whatever. Yeah, it is totally an attention. But we also think it's free. Like, I still kind of feel like it's free. Like, I'm not losing anything by losing 8 hours of my day to watching some bullshit I didn't even choose.
Yeah. Well, is Fraud available on Blu-ray?
No, I don't think it's available on Blu-ray. I think it's
or DVD,
available.
anything physical.
No, actually, that's a really
Oh,
interesting.
what the
maybe
hell?
I've
You
never-
know, we need to own a copy.
I've got my digital copy on iTunes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. There is a physical copy you can get through Grasshopper Educational, I think, which is like our distributor for educational, like for colleges and stuff. I think they do have a DVD you can buy, but it's crazy expensive. Yeah, it's $375. So
Also, what are you teaching people with fraud? It's on an education.
it's been really interesting because I've done a lot of like college like lectures or speaking engagement type things, and it is like I think that we should teach media literacy to kids in high school or middle school or younger, because there is this sort of like idea that we trust our eyes and we don't know how manipulative editing can be, and people still are that way. I don't understand. But like, so that's sort of it's been included in a lot of, there's like found footage courses at some colleges, and it's also used to like teach some media literacy stuff. But it's so important, it's so much more important now than it ever has been.
Yeah, I think American culture, Western culture, we're kind of learning the hard way with media.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Like, I actually think that little wrinkle of like, oh, weird, people think documentaries are journalism, huh? I think that realization that I think I had it at the exact same time Steve Bannon had it, and I went on to make fraud, and he went on to make propaganda about Hillary Clinton or whatever.
I mean, I don't know. I trust Michael Moore.
Oh, God.
I don't know. Seems legit to me. All right, so let's pivot into what you're doing now, Dean. That apparently you have put. God, you started this project over a decade ago, and it's taken you. How long have you been working on the feature?
I've been working on the feature. I've been working on the Marcel the Shell feature for at least 6 years. We just finished in August, so yeah, it's over 6 years by now.
So
but the character in the short predate that. That's literally like 10 years ago we made the short.
Yeah, it was a massive YouTube video,
Right.
and stop motion. And was that your first introduction into stop motion?
I think so, except for like maybe little videos that like me and my brothers made as kids. But yeah.
And then you decided that you wanted to make a film about this seashell with shoes on.
Yeah, when it came out, it was like so huge on the internet. It was like a character that was very dear to me and to Jenny Slate, who does the voice of Marcel and who I write it with. And it just was like the way that a like quote unquote children's character gets kind of categorized in the math or in the minds of like most entertainment companies that would be interested in partnering with you to expand that. It really grossed us out, and we were kind of like, so we got a lot of offers to make a feature, make a TV show or whatever, and none of them seemed like they were, I don't know, like interested in making the same kind of thing that I was interested in making. And so we just like waved them off, and we were like, nah, all right. But, like we made a couple of picture books, which were just like fun. And that seemed like a fun way to kind of slowly expand the world of Marcel. And so we just waved them off. And then I think it was like 5 years later or something, we were like, had an idea that maybe it could become a feature, but we knew we needed like, I certainly felt like not only is it a character that like a studio is not going to be happy that like I want to hold on to the rights to the character, and I don't want any merchandise, and I don't want blah, 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 like they're not used to creators holding any cards when they go into these negotiations. And so with something like Marcel that already has a fan base and already has like is already popular on the internet, like I don't know, it was weird. So whatever, many years later we had this idea about what a feature could look like and what it could be like and how to make it, which I think comes back to documentary, because I basically was like really committed to trying to find a way to make a feature film that told a story and was orchestrated in the way you expect a feature film to be, but that felt really authentically documentary. And obviously doing that with like a, fictional character like Marcel, who's animated, is like, you have to kind of rethink all your production models. And so part of the reason that it took a long time, in addition to being animated, was like figuring out how do we write a screenplay with this character that feels like a documentary, and never actually sit down and like, you know, be like interior shell house or whatever. So we started by just doing like lots and lots of improvisation, just recording audio, and then from those like improvs and from those kind of like almost like improv prompts, I and my co-writer Nick Paley, who's also an editor, we basically like then wrote the movie around those great pieces of improv that we loved, and then we'd go back in and like we'd add a character here and be like, okay, now we're gonna improv this scene. And I can't wait for you guys to see it, because it really feels like a documentary. And my hope is people are going to be like, what? How did they make this? It feels like a documentary, and it's an animated shell.
Well, as we would like to call it, a mockumentary, because you're taking
Boo.
No.
Here we go.
I used to hate You know what? No, Dean, I'm pitching you this. It's the Truth Trilogy. You start with Brody, and you have a comedian who's very defended, but you know you're getting in there and you're finding the truth. Then we go to Fraud, and you construct a complete faux reality out of real life. Now you're creating, this character isn't even human, but we're finding the truth here.
What is human?
Yeah,
I know. What is narrative? What is film? We're so profound here. And actually, I had an idea. I got the title, but we need the script. Profound footage.
or
Dean, get on.
I much prefer it to mockumentary. I just think mockumentary has this baggage of being like, people picture like A Mighty Wind or like Christopher Guest movies, and I don't know, docufiction sounds more. I mean, I love those movies, but I don't know.
You know, oh my God, we have a film fest about this shit, and I remember being so allergic to that term mockumentary. I'm like, no, everything, we're changing it to faux documentary, because I felt like it was a derogative term. Like,
yeah, it just sounds like a fucking flibberty gibbet thing.
Yeah, but you know, I came around and I read a French author, and he was talking about how we're mocking the format. That's all we're mocking. And I'm like, you know, honestly, I feel like you making this stop motion shell thing that would be like something cute on TikTok that a million people would see and I would scroll by. I am honestly like very excited for it. I'm constantly moved to tears by like stop motion that become like more human than human.
Yeah. I mean, the reason that I was like, oh, this can be stop motion is by its nature. I mean, I think a lot of times it's used to give something like a creepy aesthetic because it's so like staccato and weird and inhuman. But there's something about it that's so vulnerable because it's like human and fallible. It's recognizably, I don't know, like human and vulnerable. There's a vulnerability to something that is cute that's stop motion. Trying to just fucking do its level best to be a thing is like, I feel so connected to that, and you really see it in stop motion because it's hard and imprecise, and yeah, I think that is something you're gonna love about it. I hope.
Well, it's definitely like Uncanny Valley, except when it's like a shell with an eyeball at the hole. It's like, well, what is that? And you know, stand-up comedy. So the only thing we know about a person who hits the stage is what they look like. And what you've pointed out to me, Clark, is a lot of people open up just deconstructing that.
Yeah.
So by the end of like maybe a minute, you're kind of like, well, okay, what's left now? Yeah, like I got nothing. But then now they're free to do whatever the fuck they want because they've kind of removed your prejudice there. And when you look at a stop motion character, it's almost like cartoon. It's like, well, what can I bring? Like, what baggage can I put on that shell? If anything,
totally.
It's cute.
I think I love that more than like we just premiered the movie at Telluride, and I had sort of forgotten how emotional it was because I've been working on it for so long, and it was so great to see. Like I was connected back to like, oh yeah, when we had this original idea, I was so pumped that people were going to step in to the theater being like, oh yeah, silly thing from the internet 10 years ago. All right, whatever, I'll watch this. And then they're just like completely emotionally devastated by it. It's like my favorite part of it. It's so unexpectedly emotional and real.
What was that movie where they were claymation real people, but like the trailer had them getting on a plane? It came out like 4 years ago.
Anomalisa.
Oh, Anomalisa, yeah.
I remember that damn trailer made me tear up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that movie's great. So my favorite thing about that movie is that they which we do a little bit of in Marcel, is like they you somehow know, I don't know if it's just because I'm a filmmaker, you know how laborious the process of stop motion is. To me, it's the funniest thing in the world that they'll take in that movie 3 minutes to just show him waiting for his credit card to clear.
Yeah.
And you know someone worked on it for a month and a half.
Oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. Lee Hardcastle. Do you know his work?
I don't think so. What's he mean?
Look him up on YouTube. He does stop motion, and he did one, the hamster one. What's it called?
Hamster Hell.
Hamster
Yeah,
Hell.
this guy is hilarious.
That's my my gift to you. Watch that. It's one of my favorite things ever. And if you're gonna make me cry watching Marcel, I want you to cry watching. I need you to cry watching Hamster Hell.
I showed Hamster Hell to far too many people. They got way too upset about it.
Oh man, I'm getting emotional right now. You know, honestly, no. If we're gonna, I know we're reaching our time. If I'm gonna end on a recommendation, I honestly think. Do you know Ghostwatch? Have you ever heard of that?
I don't think so.
So Ghostwatch, the BBC did a Halloween special in 1992, and it was a live recording from the most haunted house in England. The thing was they pre-recorded it, and it was a lie. And Leslie Manning, we had her on 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I'd love to have her on now. I feel like we're much better. But so she looked at live television and deconstructed it, and really was trying to figure out how, like, she was chasing verisimilitude, and was like, how do we really make
You've been holding on to that word. The same book that taught you mockumentary verisimilitude
tucked into his back pocket this whole conversation.
Yeah.
Dean, you've heard of a swear jar? We have a verisimilitude jar.
Verisimilitude jar
that he has to deposit $1 into.
Now, there's a documentary on Behind the Curtains that really goes far.
Yeah,
apparently it's unavailable like fraud. So, so I read a transcript. I bought a book, and I was like, oh, they wrote a book about it. No, it's a book that's a transcript of the documentary. Anyway, in that documentary, Leslie, she talks about how the BBC had over 11 million people tune into that. It worked on a horror level that they didn't expect would, because they all thought it was kind of dumb. Also, she was doing a thing where her whole idea was like, maybe don't trust everything the news says. So we'll call it Ghostwatch. And so much like with War of the Worlds, the media took hold of it, and they spun it. They got mad. They're like, you can't do this shit. And somehow a kid committing suicide was essentially tied into Ghostwatch, and they blamed it for it. Anyway, Leslie would always talk about how the reaction was people were terrified and they tuned out. And then when they were reassured and told that it was fiction, they got very angry. So much so that the BBC was nominated for several awards for that feature, and they withdrew from them all because they just wanted people to forget. Wow. And I mean, it never came to America. So
is it convincing on a verisimilitude level?
It's great because they have an anchor in studio. They have a guy in America answering phone calls with a bay of psychics. Then they have people on the ground in a news van. Then they have a reporter in the building with the family. Also, the great thing is it's kind of like lighthearted, kind of like WNUF, like we're doing a live stream.
Yeah.
Except the subplot is really dark.
And these are all news presenters.
They're all real. These
are trusted news presenters that are doing a bit now.
And
wow.
The thing is, Leslie knew, like, we're really going to win if this film is put on in the background and people ignore it. But when they pop in, maybe they catch something, and then they'll question it the whole time. So there's a ghost in Ghostwatch who makes so we've screened it 3 times, like just in our house.
Yeah.
And we counted up to 4. When we talked to her, I think she said there were over 11.
Yeah.
So like it's the movie that keeps on giving. But it's October, so if there's ever a time to check it out,
I'm going to watch that tonight. You guys have given me so many great new things that I'm adding to my list. It's my favorite part of like making movies is that people see what you make and then they're like, oh, this reminds me of this, or this reminds me of this. And it's like, oh my God, you have the best vetting process by like making stuff and putting it out into the world.
Well, we recommend fraud to most people too. We're
great.
like, we think as found footage fans and people who curate the stuff, you're the peak of the mountain. Like people who really understand the editing and how to really manipulate those fine moments. Like you make the great stuff, and I really think Fraud. It doesn't deserve to not be a part of the conversation every time, because
I
it's
know.
such a good example of what you can do with just editing somebody else's stuff and really making you villainize that family.
That's so funny. I felt very like close to them. Like obviously, yes, they're saying that they're. I feel protective. Obviously, yes, they're saying that they like burnt down their house, but I but I feel that they were like. I guess I just feel like it could be any family, and so I sort of feel like they're justified in it. Like it's it's the logical conclusion of any sort of like capitalistic structure is to like see what you can get away with and exploit loopholes or weaknesses, and so I always think that like they seem like not that. Obviously, they're not great parents because they like take their kids out of school and kill their rabbits and then flee to Canada, but yeah, I mean, the idea that it's just so interesting to me that we have to constantly relearn this lesson over and over again. Like you brought up War of the Worlds. It's like people, apparently believe that, and then they believe Ghostwatch, and then they believe Fraud, and it's just really interesting. We have to keep reminding ourselves.
Well, and I, honestly, if I'm going to make an argument for Fraud being a positive thing, it's a cautionary tale. Like, don't dump all your shit on YouTube.
Yeah,
and if
pay
you
your
do,
bills.
If you do, this can happen.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what I just thought of? Have you watched How To with John Wilson?
Yes, I love it. So good.
I put you on that level. He
similarly is somebody who's like, I don't know him, but I know some people that worked on it, and he's like, obsessive about his footage, and I think they used a ton of his footage that he had just logged over the years of living in New York in the show, and I think it's like such a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Again,
every shot is a like specific, like I lived in New York for a while. It feels like every shot in that entire show would have been the one interesting or crazy thing that you saw that week in living in New York or whatever. Like it's just an incredible density.
Yeah, it's like constructed purely out of privileged moments. And there's like a through line that you don't know what is real and what's not.
Because totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I
don't know. I haven't read really like, I know a little bit about the process because I know some of the editors that worked on it, but I don't know. I know they went out and like they had some teams to go out and like, okay, let's find, awnings or whatever, like in New York. But did they have scaffoldings? Yeah. Do you know if they like staged anything?
I don't think they staged anything, but they kind of harvested reality in a forward-thinking way, where it's
right.
We have potential when we go into this shop that this guy is kind of a loose cannon, but we're not going to put all our eggs in that basket.
Yeah,
and
that's what a question that we got a lot about Fraud was like. How did you get so like sort of lucky that all these moments were in their footage that you could find, let's say the car sinking shot or whatever. And it's I always think like that wasn't what was available guided it. So if we couldn't find them like blowing up their house, then we looked for like My Neighbor's House on Fire, and so a little bit they're looking like people who have that criticism, or it's not exactly criticism, but question, are looking at it's the equivalent of looking at a vanity license plate and being like, what are the chances that this guy named Scott would get the license plate Scott's car?
Yeah, I because of my own personal insecurity, I shied away from a lot of questions I thought would be basic bitch about Fraud, but I don't know, maybe we could talk again and I'll bug you about them. Just because,
yeah, please.
When you're working within the parameters, I can only imagine that you spent like a month straight of your life just digging through it, trying to construct a narrative.
Oh, that's an interesting part of it. We like how we made it. We basically spent I want to say it was the first 3 or 4 months just going through. We had like a really vague outline just from having watched his clips for years. Like I knew little pieces I could probably find, or I knew like, oh, there's lots of driving. There's lots of like going to hotels or celebrating purchases. So there was kind of a loose outline of what the story could be. But then we spent, I think, 3 months just just me and my editor, John Rippon, who also deserves the hugest of shout outs, just spent 3 months watching all the footage and cataloging it, like basically tagging moments with like a set number of keywords, which you can do in Final Cut 10, or you could at the time. And so we had these like keywords. You're like, okay, mom angry. Every time we find a moment where mom looks pissed off, we're going to tag it with this mom angry tag. And then by the end of that 3 months, we had a database that was searchable. So we could kind of construct scenes halfway with that.
Dang. Yeah. That sounds like a fucking godsend of a tool for making that kind of film.
Yeah.
It's the only reason we use Final Cut 10, which I think Final Cut 10 is like horrible. And I think people haven't really adopted it, but it was the only one at the time where you could do that.
Okay, I know you editing nerds in your Final Cut. I've heard so many podcasts where people argue about the best version. What are we on now with Final Cut?
Oh, I lost track. I switched to Premiere. I had no idea. They lost me. I genuinely think that they were like 10, because I don't know if you guys know about all this drama, but like Final Cut 9 was like, everyone used Final Cut other than like the OG like industry standards is still Avid, I think, but everybody used Final Cut who was like coming out of school and was young and wanted to do editing, and then they switched to Final Cut 10, or Final Cut X, which is like a total ground up rebuild of how everything works. And I think it was very ahead of its time. It's like maybe 10 years ahead of its time, because it was so annoying to people that had gotten used to like any non-linear editing thing. And so everyone abandoned it. It was like, fuck you, Final Cut. You like did us dirty. And you know, maybe there's a few devotees, but people love to argue about whether it was like brilliant or shitty.
All right, I'm going to tap you in, Randy. What was that shirt? There was a Final Cut joke in one of the movies we showed at UF 24 Hour that only you got.
It's in I Blame Society. He has a RIP FCP7 shirt.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which is the one that I used in school as well.
7, I think maybe was the last one before they went to X. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
So, Randy, are you similarly like, fuck Final Cut because they changed?
I haven't done video editing since I left community college, really, but I was kind of on that train as well. It basically turned into like iMovie.
Yes. Yeah. The real devotees, or the real like prosumer users, were like, fuck you, you're trying to make me like use your iMovie thing because you want to sell, I don't know, cell phones to dummies. And then all the and then all the amateurs were like, well, this is too complex, I'm just going to use iMovie. So it sort of like alienated everyone.
All right, Randy, turn off your mic and the camera.
Yeah, Randy, thanks for ruining the show with nerd talk.
I would buy an RIP FCP7 shirt, though. I didn't know that was available.
I think they made it for the movie.
I think so.
Oh, got it.
And to end on a controversial note, fuck
please.
Promising Young Woman and go watch I Blame Society. That is the stamp. It's great, and it's found footage. It's very feminist forward.
It's great. So Dean,
you guys there's no like, you guys are doing such like, you're doing God's work by curating found footage, because there's not like a huge mainstream awareness of it. But I mean, like every time I talk to people who are really every time I talk to people who have really dived into it, I hear about like 3 new great found footage movies that, you know, I've now been like touring with this movie on and off and have seen tons of them, but like I haven't heard, there's both of those that you mentioned I haven't heard of. Ghostwatch and I Blame Society. I don't know.
Well, that's what we do.
we're here to serve.
Thank you for it.
Dean, anytime you want recommendations, come hang out. This was beyond a thrill. We're so honored to have you on here. Again, Fraud is one of those hallmark movies for us, even though Clark went on 3 podcasts and told everybody we all hated it. And it was...
Dean, I fought for 4 fucking years. Okay.
Yeah, you know, we have to vet the things he brings up, otherwise we end up with you know.
Have I ever done you dirty? I've never done you wrong. I bring heat, baby.
Dean, love you, man.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me and for talking about Fraud and for screening it at your festival. It's also on Canopy if people have library memberships.
Perfect. And then
not our audience.
So tell us when we can expect Marcel.
You know, I don't know. We had our premiere at Telluride a few weeks ago, and we're working out the distribution deals with various distributors. Hopefully it'll be within the year though.
Oh, so you're still doing the fest circuit?
Well, I don't know if we'll do another festival, especially because who knows whether festivals are happening,
Indeed.
Depends on COVID. But we'll I think probably commit to a distributor in the next few weeks. Okay. So I'll know more then.
All right. Well,
good luck,
keep
man.
us updated. We got to promote it.
Yeah, please. I am going to hit you up for recommendations though.
Oh, dude.
Let's do it.
Please do.
All right. Thanks so much, you guys.